I've been working as a canine handler for almost 9 years now. And for most of that time, my partner has been a 4-year-old German Shepherd named Rex. And if you've never worked with a police dog before, let me tell you, they're not just animals you bring along for backup. They're partners in every sense of the word. They read your body language. They sense tension before you even recognize it yourself. And Rex especially has always been the steady type, trained in tracking and narcotics detection, calm under pressure. The kind of dog who doesn't spook at loud noises, chaotic scenes, or dark spaces. Which is why the night I'm about to tell you about still sticks with me in a way I can't quite shake. We were called out to assist after patrol units had chased a male suspect on foot through a residential neighborhood. And somewhere near this older 2-story house, he just seemed to disappear. No vehicles leaving the area, no back fences broken, nothing obvious. And officers had already cleared the first floor of the house with consent from the homeowner. But they didn't feel confident enough to call it clean, so Rex and I were asked to run it. The first floor was uneventful. Kitchen, living room, laundry area, everything neat, nothing overturned. And when we started up the stairs, I remember thinking it was probably just another false alarm. But at the top of the stairs, there was this narrow hallway with 3 bedrooms and a small bathroom at the end. And something about the air felt heavier, quieter than it should have been. Like the house was holding its breath, and Rex, who usually moves with this confident forward pull, slowed down just slightly, not enough to alarm me yet, but enough that I noticed. We cleared the first bedroom. Empty, second bedroom, empty, bathroom, empty. And then as we stepped back into the hallway toward the last door at the far end, Rex stopped completely, his body going rigid, ears snapping forward, tail stiff, and then this low growl started in his chest. The kind I've only heard when he's locked onto a real threat. And before I could even say his name, he erupted into sharp, aggressive barking directed straight down the hallway. And that's when I saw it too. Standing just outside the last bedroom doorway was a tall, dark figure, completely still, not moving, not reacting, just there. And it wasn't shaped like any of the officers on scene. It didn't look like tactical gear. Didn't reflect light the way a person normally does. It was just a solid, shadowy presence against the dim hallway light. I announced myself loudly, identified as police, gave a clear canine warning, the whole script we're trained to use. But there was no response at all, no flinch, no raised hands, nothing. And after a few long seconds, the figure turned slowly and walked into the bedroom. Not running, not panicked, just calm, deliberate steps. And I gave Rex the command to move forward. But he wouldn't budge. He actually leaned backward, claws scraping against the hardwood, pulling away from that room as hard as he could. And I've never felt that kind of resistance from him before or since. I tried again, firmer tone, guiding him forward, but he dug in even harder. And in that moment, I realized whatever he was reacting to, he wanted no part of it. So I made the decision to clear the room myself. Weapon drawn, heart pounding in my ears. Slicing the corner carefully, checking behind the door, under the bed, inside the closet. And the room was empty, completely empty. Windows locked from the inside, no signs of forced entry. Number attic access, no crawl space panel, no movement, no sound. And I stood there longer than I probably should have. Just staring at a room that seconds earlier, I was certain someone had walked into. And when I stepped back into the hallway, Rex was still tense, staring at the doorway like he expected something to come back out. And to this day, I cannot explain what we saw or why my dog reacted with genuine fear. But that wasn't the only call that's followed me home over the years. Early in my career, back when I was still a rookie working night shift in a small, isolated town, we had a severe thunderstorm roll through that knocked out power across half the county. Transformers blowing, trees down, roads flooded. And right in the middle of that chaos, dispatch patched through a 911 call that chilled everyone in the room. It sounded like a young girl whispering that she'd been kidnapped and was being held against her will. The line cutting in and out was static and thunder. And the address that pinged back was this house on the edge of town that most people thought had been abandoned. My backup that night was Chris, and as we pulled up the driveway, the headlights swept across knee-high grass and a roof that looked like it had caved slightly in one corner. The place looked neglected, windows dark except for the faint flicker of lightning reflecting off the glass. And when we knocked, after a long pause, a man in his early 30s answered the door, blinking like we just woken him up, claiming he lived there alone and that it must have been a pocket dial. But his explanation didn't match the fear in that voice we'd heard on the recording. Because of the nature of the call, we secured a telephonic warrant and went inside. And the smell hit immediately, damp, sour air mixed with something stale. The house cluttered in a way that felt deliberate. Piles of clothing stacked in corners, dirty dishes crusted in the sink, cockroaches scattering when our flashlights swept across the floor. And in one back room, I found children's toys arranged in a way that didn't feel natural. Like they'd been placed there for show, and sitting against the wall was a life-size doll dressed in women's clothing. Wig slightly crooked, eyes staring forward. And there was something about that room that made my stomach twist. Not because it was messy, but because it felt staged. As we continued clearing, the homeowner grew increasingly nervous, pacing, asking why we needed to check the basement, insisting there was nothing down there. And of course, that only confirmed we were going downstairs. And the basement was partially finished but poorly lit, concrete walls sweating from the storm. And behind a shelving unit, we noticed scuff marks on the floor that suggested it had been moved recently. So we shifted it aside and found a concealed door leading to a small hidden room. And inside that room was a man in his 40s. Pale, thin, eyes squinting against the light. And for a split second, my brain struggled to process what I was seeing because he didn't look real. He looked like someone who'd been erased from the world. Later we learned he'd been reported missing 2 years earlier. And the only reason we were even there was because his captor had accidentally left a phone within reach, and he managed to activate Siri to call 911. And here's the detail that still unsettles me the most. When dispatch played back the original call, the voice that sounded like a young girl begging for help was actually his, because he'd been forced for so long to mimic that tone and pitch that it had become second nature. And even while we were pulling him out, he kept slipping back into that higher voice without realizing it. You'd think after something like that, nothing else would surprise you. But there was another night that still lingers in my mind. We responded to a neighbor reporting a woman scream from the house next door. And when we arrived, the front door was slightly open, not forced. Just ajar, like someone had stepped outside for a moment. And inside the house, everything looked neat. Couch cushions straight, kitchen counters clean. But on the dining table was a glass of water with condensation still clinging to the sides, like it had been poured minutes before. And upstairs we found an unmade bed and a lamp knocked onto the floor, subtle signs of a struggle. And then in the hallway, there was a wet smear of blood leading toward the bathroom, where more blood had pooled near the drain. But there was no body, no injured person calling out, nothing. As we cleared the rest of the house, I heard a faint creak from below and realized a basement door that had been closed earlier was now slightly open. And down there in the unfinished basement, we found a metal folding chair with freshly cut zip ties lying on the floor beside it and a large pool of blood soaking into the concrete. And before we could fully react, a man burst from behind stacked boxes, sprinted past us, smashed through a small basement window, and disappeared into the rainy night, glass shattering, rain pouring in. And we set up a perimeter immediately, called in additional units, searched yards, alleys, wooded areas, but the homeowner was never located. And despite the neighbor's report of a woman screaming, no missing female was ever connected to that address. No hospital reports matched the blood we found. No clear explanation surfaced. And those calls remained some of the most unsettling of my career. Not just because they were intense, but because they ended with unanswered questions. And in this line of work, you're trained to seek closure, to document, to solve. But sometimes you're left with an empty room, a hidden door, or a blood-stained basement. And the only thing that follows you home is the quiet realization that not everything you encounter can be neatly explained. Everything you encounter can be neatly explained.